Welcome to GlideChat, where we give you the rundown of all things ServiceNow. Let's talk about the now, right now.
And welcome to this episode of GlideChat. I'm Kylie Alexander, account executive at GlideFast Consulting, and I am here with Ebony Staten of CareerVillage. Ebony, welcome to GlideChat.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Good to have you here. And I want to get into the work that you do at CareerVillage. So if you can tell us, what is the mission of CareerVillage?
So the mission of CareerVillage is to democratize access to career information for underrepresented people. I would say that initially when we first started, we really thought that we were going to be in the K-12 space. And it was 2020 that shook that up, not only for everyone, but for CareerVillage as well. And we learned that there were so many more scenarios where a space like CareerVillage could be useful. So initially it was young people. Today it is underrepresented people. We have expanded our scope.
You know, that's really compelling because I think about what the world was going through in 2020. I think about where I was in 2020, very different than where I am right now. So could you speak a bit about the capacity and the ability for CareerVillage to be able to pivot and how that's been like a key part of who you all are?
Yeah. So I would say one of the things that has characterized us is our small but nimble team, right? So we don't have a ton of people in the background. We have maybe about 20 of us. But in 2020, it was a lot closer. I wasn't even here yet. 2020, I want to say it was like 7. And so during that time, everyone was confined, as you know, to home and to small circles, and the ability to connect with folks for career information was fleeting. CareerVillage was one of the few places, if not the only, where folks could still reach out and get meaningful and timely information around their career development journey and not feel as though they were being slighted. It was during that time that school districts and workforce boards, nonprofits, everyone was all on CareerVillage and still are because of that accessibility. But it also meant that as a team, we had to be nimble in order to provide that service so that they had what they needed when they needed it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious if we could just kind of tap into that a little bit more. How do you all go about the work of democratizing access to career information?
Yeah. So I would say there's a few different ways. One is making sure that it's accessible to everyone. And so that is a huge part of our focus in the development of the tools that we provide. So we have careervillage.org. We also have our AI career coach. And in the development of each of those, ensuring that translation features, screen reading, and the list goes on, has all been front and center. Even the partners that we partner with, we are intentionally reaching out to folks with a different perspective. How might we be able to connect with this particular organization that serves this demographic to ensure that our tools can reach and support the needs of all? I would say that would be the biggest umbrella as to how we go about democratizing access. One is really the accessibility, and 2 is the purpose and intentionality behind it.
Yeah. So, you know, I think about what you just said about in 2020, we were a very small team of 7, and now we're at 20, still a pretty small team, right? Relative.
Absolutely.
But the work you're doing is so amazing. So if you could talk a bit about what role does technology play with such a, as you describe it, a small but nimble team?
Absolutely. Technology is huge. We are a distributed workforce. So our team is on the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest, South America. We are all over. And in that recognition, we also recognize how we need to set up our tools so that we can lean towards accessibility. It's not only in how we serve, it's also how we connect with one another. It isn't just a distant and far gone kind of need need. Instead, it is a day-to-day kind of conversation. How might we increase engagement? How might we as a team work to talk together? We have always been a team that is very focused on human connection. And regardless of the tools that we develop, there will always be that undercurrent of making sure that there is a way for people to connect, whether it's AI or it's a web-based tool, and the list goes on. The people connection is always going to be important to us.
Oh, I love the story. And you're kind of leading me into the next question that I'm really curious about. What is the differentiator? What separates you from maybe others in a similar, within your industry that are doing similar work?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, because it's one that we have to grapple with on a routine basis too. How is it that we set ourselves apart, and how are we already set apart? I think one is the fact that, yes, we are a nonprofit, but we operate like a startup. And I think that is the biggest piece that would be our kind of delineator, right? We have a world where we recognize it is constantly changing. And because it's constantly changing and the needs are so diverse, then we too have to be able to respond to those needs and changes. And quite honestly, some of the typical organizational structures don't always work for us. We have to typically lean towards more of the startup kinds of routines and sprints, and the list goes on for how we can do that and respond to all of the shifts and changes that are constantly happening.
Sure. Now, with that said, I have to ask you this. Listen, I've been snooping on your LinkedIn profile. And, you come from a background, you're a marriage and family therapist.
Yes,
You've
ma'am.
been in leadership in higher education institutions.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're now here at CareerVillage. So when I think about this, I'm curious how your experience and expertise has informed the work that you currently do at CareerVillage.
Honestly, I think the learning has gone both ways. I think when we have workspaces, there are those times where we have those really healthy workspaces, and we have those workspaces where there is room for improvement. And I honestly feel like CareerVillage is a community that allows us to bring our best forward. I can say that in bringing our best forward, it means that when asked for our opinions matter. Our opinions are heard. Our experience is leaned upon. Our insights are considered. That's not something you always get everywhere. So regardless of how many degrees folks have behind their names, there are some spaces where it goes ignored or overlooked or completely cast aside, but CareerVillage is not one of those places. And so when you have a place that fosters the human being, then you have equally a place that is going to ensure that it allows for folks to blossom. It allows for folks to continue to grow and develop, and even desire to learn, grow, and develop, right? Like when you have the opportunity to be invested in, you want to invest. And so I would say, with all of my experience, I have now found a place where I can invest that experience to say, hey, when we develop a partner experience, it is going to be a partner experience that puts the human first. It isn't going to be a space where we are going to add something on to folks' plate, but instead recognizing that we are all just doing the best we can with what we have, and how can we lean on one another in order to build the best, right? And
Sure.
so I would say that would be if I was going to give you an authentic answer, that would be it.
That's some answer. And so, given that, what motivates you to drive CareerVillage to its next phase?
My heart has always been in student development. It has been in student development even before I knew student development was a thing. I worked, as you know, in higher education, and in higher education, like most of us, had a little, college on-campus job, right? And in that on-campus job, I had the opportunity to speak into some of the processes that existed there. And that was where I got bit by the bug. One, the details, the process, and listening to the person, to the audience, right? And I would say because CareerVillage allows me to remain close to that passion, close to that vantage point, it will likely continue to be a place where I want to continue to invest and put in the work, the time, because it puts the student first. When we think about the student, we aren't just thinking about the K-12 environment. We're thinking about the person who's transitioning careers. We're thinking about the person who just got laid off and now needs to make some significant changes. We're thinking about the person who wants to upskill and doesn't really have a safe space to have that conversation yet, but they still need the information nevertheless. We're thinking about the person who also is looking on the internet and finding there is just so much information. How do I know what to trust? When we say student, we're thinking of the learner as a whole. This isn't just in one part of life. We are all learners at multiple phases in our lives for multiple reasons. And so our goal is to continue to do that. And it closely aligns with my personal passion. So here I am.
That's so interesting that you say that because, I'll just given like a 360-degree view of like you within CareerVillage and then even broader, you're just kind of a general expertise and experiences. There's always this gravitational pull back to the human experience, the human being, the human experience. And you talk about that in terms of like the organizationally, how CareerVillage is structured. And you even said things like, in this organization, in this culture, our opinion matters, who we are as people matter, our experiences matter. And then you also kind of circled that around where it comes to the learners and the students. So it's really beautiful to see how holistic and how connected that is.
Absolutely. But I'd also say it's rare, right? It is quite easy to find oneself kind of deviating from its mission, deviating from its passion. And I can say that I am thankful that CareerVillage is a space where we hold one another accountable. Are we putting the learner first in this conversation? How do we know that we are centering their experience within this process, this project, or even this request? And we have these conversations routinely so that we don't allow it to fall by the wayside. When we talk about ensuring that we are supporting folks, it is something that we are constantly concerned with.
Sure. So let's switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
You mentioned a bit ago in our conversation that CareerVillage is a nonprofit, but operates like a startup. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I would say as a startup, quite often you are in a space where you have to create systems that allow you to respond quickly to change, right? And in those systems, once you find your niche is when you typically slow down. You typically kind of spread your wings, you get comfortable in that space, you now start building up your workforce, your team. With building up those folks, now you have the ability to start thinking about the long run, right? And there is nothing wrong with that perspective. However, things aren't running or operating the same way that they used to, not when I was in college. When I was in college, we were still registering for classes by phone. And so with that says, wait a minute, like things are changing so fast. If we were to get to a place where we did decide, you know what, we can kind of stretch our legs, at the pace things are speeding up, we would end up finding ourselves in a place where we can't be as helpful and supportive as we initially endeavor to be. So as long as changes are happening in education, which we know are happening all the time, as long as changes are happening in the economic space, which means that they're happening with employees, then that means we too need to be able to shift with those changes. So our passion, our nonprofit passion is there. And with that nonprofit passion being there, then we also recognize that our startup speed still has to be present.
Yeah, sure. So Ebony, this makes me ask you, you talk about being nimble, you talk about being a nonprofit, but having the flexibility and the kind of a peeking around the corner aptitude of a startup. So what role has technology and ServiceNow in particular played in that?
Yeah, honestly, ServiceNow has been a space where we have had to even expand our thinking even beyond where we are. When we think about technology as a whole, yes, we all know AI is a thing, and we are all finding ways to be able to ensure that it not only serves us well, but also serves our learners well. But when we think about the large tools like what ServiceNow offers, I think it allows us to think about a world or a time where we can provide the best of the best, right? What does it look like to expand our services, and what does it look like as in doing that to come alongside our partners in a way that allows them to be able to interact with us and our resources in a way that kind of fits into their process, right?
Sure.
So I just had a conversation with the Impact team, as well as Alan Norris. Hey, Alan. And with that, it's always been really exciting to be able to explore what's possible, right? Because there's so much that's changing. Tools like ServiceNow are also changing, and with them changing, it allows us to kind of come alongside and say, "Hey, what do you guys have now that might really support this?" I think as we continue on, I'm really hopeful that we'll continue to locate ways to make some of the work easier on the partner success side, and really kind of looking for some automation kind of tools and things, but that says that I've got to keep learning, right? So that nimble kind of spirit isn't just as an organization, it has to be at the individual team levels too. So I'm really excited about the work that we're doing, and it really allows us to be able to really expand beyond what we thought was possible initially.
Yeah, I love how you talk about thinking about what's possible and then being able to turn around and being nimble enough to implement that with ServiceNow and the team at GlideFast. So you're director of partner success.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as director of partner success, I'm sure that you have been and worked at various levels with a number of vendors and partners. Tell us a little bit about your experience with working with GlideFast as a partner.
Let me tell you. So So yes, I have had some experience with working with various vendors, and it's not very often that you get onto a call with a vendor and you automatically feel like we go way back, right? Right. The team of GlideFast has been absolutely amazing. Jason, Matt, Parush, Ted, everyone has really kind of it's hard to even think of the word, but kind of come around CareerVillage and say, hey, what do you need? What kind of questions do you have? There was never a time where I asked a question and I felt like a burden, right? They were eager to help. They were quick to respond. They set up tools for us to be able to communicate quickly. And even within our conversations, they kept me on track.
Sure.
So they kept me focused and even taught me as we went, right? So even with making sure that I had the tools that I needed, it was refreshing to be in a space where even though they weren't necessarily part of the CareerVillage team, it still felt like we were all a part of the same team. There was never a seam that was experienced. It was very, very fluid.
Sure. And when you have that fluid experience, I imagine that sets you up for bigger and better outcomes as well.
I would say so, but it also kind of makes you nosy. That was where the conversation, what else is possible, comes from.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. You know, you talked a bit about the engagement and the use of ServiceNow. How is CareerVillage using ServiceNow in its business processes?
Yeah. So what we're working on right now is working to build out a portal that allows for that continuous kind of communication without being cumbersome to the educator and the partner. So this particular tool is being developed with the partner and the educator in mind. So if it's helpful at all, we have each of our groups separated into kind of a 3-tiered kind of connection. We have the partner, the contracting entity. We have the educator, the group that is facilitating or leading a group of learners. These could be mentors, teachers, the list goes on. Then we also have our learners. And so that is how our data flows, is between the three. But our portal is looking to support the educator experience and the partner experience. A lot of our partners are really large partners on multiple continents. And so how do we support their work of making communication easy without making it cumbersome? And so that's where the ServiceNow portals are coming in.
Awesome. So, and finally, what's next for CareerVillage and what's next on your roadmap with ServiceNow?
Absolutely. So that was our conversation. Just, what was that? Today's Wednesday.
Yeah.
We just met, I want to say, on Monday. And that was where the conversation of what is possible. How are we kind of putting ourselves in a box? And so that's part of where we're going, is to say, hey, Ebony, y'all can do this better. And these are some of the tools you might want to consider to do that. And so I'm really excited as we get started with those conversations.
Ebony Staten, Director of Partner Success at CareerVillage. I want to thank you so much for joining me in this episode of GlideChat.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Do you have a topic in mind that you'd like to discuss? Reach out to us at glidefast.com and subscribe to our podcast for new episodes. Thanks for listening.